It is too late to prepare for this disaster, but we can start planning for the next big storm. That is the focus of Time Magazine's cover story, Lessons from Sandy. It was written by senior editor Bryan Walsh. Welcome. Here's the cover of your magazine, Lessons from the Storm. You make this point: if you don't pay now, you'll pay later.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we can all see now, we know the devastation from Sandy is great. It's going to be in the billions of dollars. If you prepare now, we'll hopefully head off future storms like this in the days to come, I think.
Doing
Bryan,
what?
But you say that we still depend on 20th century technology to power 21st century economy. What does that mean?
Well, that's specifically referring to the electrical grid. I mean, we've seen, 8 million people who have lost power here. We have a system that isn't really ready for this kind of disaster. You have a grid that can go down very easily, not just with big storms like Sandy, but even smaller events like last year's Halloween storm, where 3.2 million people lost power. If we have a system that is more like the internet, that's more flexible, that's more resilient, hopefully you can get both sort of reduce the amount of people who lose power, but also get it back online a lot faster.
Because people could tweet,
right,
but they still couldn't use internet, and they couldn't use their cell phone.
Exactly, right. I mean, the signature moment, I think, of the storm was people actually tweeting that they had lost power, which I think shows that very clearly.
What are the big lessons, though, back to the cover story here, lessons from the storm that make a difference in terms of the future?
Well, I think there's a few. One is that climate change clearly is real. I mean, scientists will differ on exactly how much climate change contributes to a storm like this, but what we know is that this will become more and more common in the future, that we'll have stronger storms, that sea level will rise, we'll have these sort of coastal flooding events that was so disastrous with Sandy. So that's one thing we need to deal with. And then secondarily, we have to think, all right, well, we have cities like New York, we have 3.7 million Americans who live just within a few feet of high tide. So these are people who will be vulnerable to any kind of event like this in the future. So we have to think, well, do we move them, or perhaps do we put sort of infrastructure out of harm's way? Do we lift up roads, subways, things like that? Do we lift up electrical grid, sort of electrical generating equipment to make sure that it doesn't get knocked out by the next storm, which is going to happen?
Can we learn from other cities like London or?
Yeah, I mean, London is a great example. I mean, they have a sea barrier. They're dealing with the Thames there. You have other cities that really have thought about this. I mean, New York has not expected a storm like this. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, the governor, talked about how it seems like we have a once-in-a-century flood every couple of years now. That's going to happen in the future. So we need to think, where do we put our equipment, where do we put our people as well, to make sure that they're not in harm's way in the future.
Bryan Walsh, the cover story. Bryan Walsh, the cover story from Time Magazine called Lessons from the Storm.
The new issue of Time, by the way, is now available online. It will be on newsstands in the Northeast tomorrow.